She was sitting at my kitchen table when I came through the back door, my daughter-in-law, alone in my house. And the door to my study, the one I had kept locked for 12 years, was standing wide open behind her. She looked up at me with the kind of smile that dares you to say something. I set my keys on the counter and felt something settle deep in my chest. Not surprise, not anger. Just the quiet confirmation of something I had known was coming for a very long time. To understand how that moment came to be, I need to take you back nearly 13 years. Back to a time before locks and lawyers and letters hidden in fireproof drawers. Back to when the woman I love most in this world was still sitting across from me at this very table. My name is Henry Calloway. I am 67 years old. I live in a small house on Birch Lane in the town of Cedarville in the hill country of Central Virginia. I spent 31 years as a county building inspector. That sounds ordinary until you realize it means I spent 3 decades learning how structures fail. Where the cracks form first, which joints carry real weight and which ones just look like they do. I retired at 62 with a modest pension, a 1994 Ford pickup that still runs, and a yellow Labrador named Biscuit who greets every morning like it is a personal miracle. My routine has not changed much in the 5 years since I stopped working. I wake at 5:15. I make coffee in the same percolator my wife bought at a church rummage sale in 2003. I sit on the back porch with Biscuit and watch the fog lift off the ridge while the coffee cools. By 7, I am at the Cedarville Diner on Route 11, sitting in the same booth by the window. 2 eggs over easy, rye toast, black coffee. The waitress, Gloria, does not write it down anymore. She just nods and brings it. After breakfast, I drive through town slowly, checking things the way I always have. A loose gutter on the Henderson's place, a cracked step on the church porch, a fence post leaning on the Dawson farm. I fix what I can. Nobody asks me to. I do it because it is what I know, and because the alternative is sitting in a quiet house with nothing but the ticking of the hall clock and the weight of an empty chair across the table. That chair belonged to my wife. Her name was Eleanor. She died 11 years ago, pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday in March. She had 14 months from that day. 14 months of hospital rooms that smelled like antiseptic and lavender because she insisted on bringing her own soap. Eleanor had a way of seeing through things, not through people exactly, through the performance people put on when they wanted something. She used to say it all the time, sitting right here on this porch after dinner. She would look at me with those steady brown eyes and say, "Henry, a locked door does not protect what is inside it. It reveals what people are willing to do to get through it." I heard that sentence 100 times. I nodded along. I agreed the way husbands agree when their wives say something true and inconvenient. But I did not understand it. Not until the day I watched my daughter-in-law try to open a door that was never meant for her. After Eleanor died, I lived in a fog for about 2 years. I went through the motions. I kept the house clean because she would have wanted that. I maintained the yard. I cooked meals I did not taste. I answered the phone when it rang and pretended to be fine when people asked. The one thing that pulled me through was my son Daniel. He was 23 when Eleanor passed, just finishing his engineering degree. He drove home every single weekend for the first year. Every Friday I would hear his car pull into the gravel driveway and something inside my chest would loosen just enough to let me breathe. He never made a fuss. He would drop his bag and say the same thing every time. "What are we fixing this weekend, Dad?" And we would fix something. A leaky faucet, a squeaky hinge, a fence section. The fixing was not the point. The being together was. Daniel graduated. He got a job at a structural engineering firm in Richmond, about 2 hours east. He was good at it, meticulous, patient. He had Eleanor's mind for systems and my hands for the physical work. By 28, he had been promoted twice and was managing his own project team. I was proud of him in the quiet way. Fathers are proud when they see their children becoming something solid. When Daniel was 30, he brought a woman home for Sunday dinner. Her name was Victoria. She was 27, tall, with dark hair pulled back tight and a handshake that gripped a fraction too long. She arrived in a car that cost more than most people in Cedarville earned in a year. Daniel was beaming. He talked about her for 10 minutes before she came inside. She was brilliant. She worked in corporate finance. She made him feel like the smartest person in the room. Victoria walked through my front door and her eyes moved across the living room in a way I recognized immediately. Not the way a guest looks at a home. The way an appraiser looks at a property. She took in the crown molding, the hardwood floors, the stone fireplace I had rebuilt after Eleanor died. She said the house had wonderful bones. She said older homes like this were rare. I noticed she said bone. Over dinner, she asked thoughtful questions about my career. But woven between those questions were others that did not belong at a first dinner. Had I thought about what I would do with the house long term? Was property tax manageable on a pension? Had I considered downsizing? Each question arrived with a smile, framed as concern rather than assessment. Daniel did not notice. He was watching her the way people watch something they cannot believe belongs to them. After dinner, he called from the driveway, "What do you think, Dad?" I chose my words carefully. "She is very polished," I said. He laughed. "Give me time," I said, "and give yourself time too." He told me I was overthinking it. He said I had been alone too long and it was making me suspicious of happiness. I wanted him to be right. If this story is already stirring something in you, I hope you will stay with me. Subscribe to this channel so stories like this keep reaching the people who need to hear them. Over the following months, the questions did not stop. They evolved. Victoria mentioned to Daniel that my house was too large for one person. She suggested they might move in to help with costs. She asked whether I had updated my will. She wondered aloud whether the house was in a trust or in my name alone. Each suggestion arrived through Daniel, always framed as concern. She never said these things directly to me. She understood that the most effective way to move a man is not to push him yourself. It is to position someone he loves to push for you. I tried to warn Daniel twice in the first year. After a Sunday dinner, when Victoria spent 20 minutes discussing property values, I told him her interests felt pointed. He said I was being unfair. After she missed 3 consecutive dinners, then reappeared with an expensive watch on his wrist, I asked how they were managing finances. He shut the conversation down. He said I was doing what lonely widowers do when their children build lives that do not need them. He was partly right about that. But I was not wrong about Victoria. The first scene that truly unsettled me happened at Thanksgiving dinner 2 years after they started dating. Victoria hosted at Daniel's apartment downtown. She told a story about a resort trip and said, laughing, Daniel wanted to stay at the budget place. Can you imagine? I looked at my son. He was smiling, but the smile did not reach his eyes. He gripped his fork the way a man grips something when he is holding himself still. People reveal themselves in the small moments. The large gestures are rehearsed. The small ones are honest. The second scene came 3 months later at Sunday dinner. As I served the pot roast Eleanor used to make, Victoria looked around the kitchen and said, "Henry, when is the last time you updated this kitchen? These cabinets have to be original." She wrinkled her nose. "If you ever sell, a renovation could add $40,000 to the price. It is a waste having this big house with one person in it." Daniel shifted. "Mom liked this kitchen," he said quietly. Victoria touched his arm. "I did not say anything about your mother, sweetheart, but I saw the way his jaw tightened. The particular silence of a man who has stopped defending the things he loves because the cost has become too high." The third scene was smaller but stayed with me longer. I stopped by Daniel's apartment unannounced to drop off some wrenches. Victoria opened the door. She was on the phone, speaking quietly, and ended the call immediately when she saw me. Too quickly. Daniel's bedroom door was closed. I could hear his voice, low and strained. He came out a few minutes later. His eyes were red. He said allergies. It was November. Victoria served coffee and was charming, warm, attentive. She asked about biscuit. For 15 minutes, I almost doubted myself. That is what makes people like Victoria effective. They give you just enough warmth to question your own instincts. The fourth scene happened at a restaurant for my birthday. The waiter, a young man barely 20, brought Victoria the wrong drink. She looked at him with quiet contempt and said, "I am going to need you to try that again. And this time, maybe actually listen." Then she turned to Daniel and called him Caleb, a different name entirely. She caught herself and laughed, said she had been talking to a colleague all day. Daniel laughed too, but something crossed his face that looked less like amusement and more like recognition, the kind a person fights against because accepting it means admitting everything is built on something hollow. Before I continue, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell me what city you are watching from. I read every single one. Knowing you are out there keeps these stories going. The fifth scene changed everything. A Thursday evening in December, I drove to Daniel's building to drop off a box of Eleanor's Christmas ornaments. Through the lobby window, I saw Victoria by the mailboxes, talking on her phone. She had not seen me. Something about her posture made me stop. She was leaning against the wall, her voice low but animated. I could not hear most of it, but I heard enough. She said, "The old man has no idea." She said, "The house alone is worth close to $700. She laughed. She said, "Once we are in, the rest is just patience." I stood on the sidewalk in the December cold with a box of my dead wife's Christmas ornaments in my arms. Something inside me became perfectly still. Not anger, something older, something that had been waiting to be confirmed. I did not confront her. I put the box back in my truck, sat in the driveway for 20 minutes watching steam rise from the hood into the cold night. I had spent 2 years watching. Now it was time to act. That night I went into my study. I unlocked the deadbolt with the only key that existed. I opened the fireproof cabinet and took out every document that mattered. The trust Eleanor and I had established 13 years before her diagnosis. The property deed, transferred into the trust a full decade before Victoria entered our lives. The investment accounts held within the trust. The life insurance policy naming Daniel as sole beneficiary with proceeds going into the trust. And in a separate envelope at the very back, a letter, Eleanor's handwriting, blue ink, his name on the front. She had written it 2 weeks before she died. She had pressed it into my hand on a Tuesday afternoon when the hospital light was pale and thin. "Give this to him when the time comes," she said. "You will know when." I had carried that letter for 11 years without opening it again. I called my attorney, Margaret Chen, that night. She answered despite it being nearly 10. When I explained what I needed, she said, "Eleanor always said this call would come." I asked for a full review of every protection in place. I asked for the prenuptial agreement verified. I asked for it done before Christmas. Then I went to the hardware store and bought a new deadbolt, heavier. I installed it myself while Biscuit watched from the hallway. The new key went on a chain around my neck, not on the hook by the front door, around my neck against my skin where I could feel it every hour. Eleanor, a locked door does not protect what is inside it. It reveals what people are willing to do to get through it. Then I waited. Daniel called 3 weeks after Christmas, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, something happened. Victoria went through the house while you were at your appointment. She found the old key on the hook. I think she made a copy." I wrapped my hand around the new key at my chest. "That key does not open the study anymore," I said. "I changed the lock 8 weeks ago." Silence on the line. "You knew," he said. "I knew someone would try. Your mother knew too. She has been asking me things," he said, "about your accounts. What happens to the house when you are gone?" She said she was just being practical. I told Daniel to stay calm. Told him I would come the next morning. Told him it was time to see everything. I arrived at 9:15. He buzzed me up without a word. He stood in the kitchen in yesterday's clothes, holding a coffee mug like something to grip. Victoria sat at the dining table, phone face down. She looked up when I walked in. Her expression was something between defensive and confident. "Henry," she said. "Good morning." I sat across from her without being invited. "You went into my study," I said. I was not asking. Her chin lifted. "I was there to water the plants." The study door was already cracked. I was not snooping. "You live alone. You are 67. We just wanted to understand the family situation. We, I said. I turned to Daniel. Did you ask her to go into the study? No, he said. I did not. Victoria recalculated. I saw documents, she said to Daniel, her voice shifting softer. I just wanted to understand what your father has planned. It affects us. What did you see? I asked. Enough to know you have structured everything so I would never have any claim. Even after years of being part of this family, the trust was established 15 years ago, I said, before you and Daniel met. Trusts can be amended, she said. By the person who created them? I agreed. She leaned forward. Henry, you never liked me. You made up your mind before you knew anything. You spent 3 years looking for proof. That is not protection, that is control. I spent 3 years paying attention, I said. There is a difference. What have I done that is so terrible, she said. I married your son. I supported him. You have not worked since 3 weeks after the wedding, I said. That was 23 months ago. Daniel has covered every shared expense. His salary, his savings. I manage the household, she said. The apartment has a cleaning service at $180 a month, I said. The household argument has limits. She turned to Daniel. Are you going to say something? He was looking at his shoes. She turned back. You have been going through his finances, invading our privacy. He is my son, I said. When he seems stressed about money, I ask questions. That is parenting. The house, I said. You have suggested moving in 4 times in 18 months. You told Daniel I am too old to maintain it. Last month you suggested a contractor assess updates to my house that you would oversee. The house is held in trust, I said. The investments are in trust. The life insurance names Daniel as sole beneficiary with proceeds going into the trust. Even if you remain married for 50 years, there is no legal mechanism by which you access any of it. The prenuptial agreement you signed confirms all premarital and inherited assets remain separate property. My attorney confirmed its enforceability 6 weeks ago. The silence had a particular quality, like the air had been removed from the room. You did all this, she said, all this planning, and never told your son. I looked at Daniel. She is right about one thing, I said. I should have told you sooner. I tried twice in the first year. Both times you closed the door before I finished. I should have pushed harder. I did not. I am sorry. He stood still for a long time. Then he looked at Victoria. She looked back. The only card she had left was him. Daniel, she said softly, you do not have to go anywhere. He stepped toward the door. I will be back later. We drove to the house separately. Inside the study, I opened the fireproof cabinet and showed him everything. The trust, the investments, the deed, the insurance. Then I took out the envelope. Your mother wrote this 2 weeks before she died, I said. She asked me to give it to you when the time was right. I have carried it for 11 years. He took it, held it without opening, turned it over looking at her handwriting. Then he read. I stood by the window, watching the street. I knew the shape of what she had written, about her grandmother who lost everything to a man who married her for her pension, about the trust and why she built it, about the particular way Daniel's heart worked, his generosity, his tendency to believe people meant love the way he meant it. She wrote that this was not a flaw, that it was what she loved most about him. But the world contained people who would see that quality and decide it was something to use. He read the last part aloud, his voice rough. She wrote, I am not asking you to be suspicious of everyone. I am asking you to pay attention to how people act when they think they have nothing to gain. Generosity under observation is performance. Generosity in private is character. Find someone who has the second kind. He folded the letter, sat for a long time. She knew, he said. Not Victoria specifically, the possibility. Your mother was clear-eyed about certain things. I have been paying her car lease for 14 months, he said. $640 a month. She told me she started a consulting business. I called the state registry. There is no record of it. When did you know? He asked. Really know? The first dinner, I said. The way she moved through the rooms. The questions about retirement and property. Your mother would have spotted it in 10 minutes. You should have told me then, he said. Even if I did not listen. You are right, I said. I kept thinking I was protecting you by avoiding conflict. What I was actually doing was protecting myself from losing you both. That was selfish. He was quiet. Then he said, "What do I do now?" We went back to the apartment together. Victoria was on the couch. She had changed clothes and done her makeup. Daniel stood in the center of the room. He had Eleanor's stillness. "I have been going through our account statements," he said. "Since the wedding, I have contributed $111,000. Rent, utilities, your car lease, the coast trip. The kitchen update you said you would pay for with freelance income. Your total deposits in 23 months are $900, one time, in March. The consulting firm you registered does not exist. I confirmed with the state. You lied," he said, not once, consistently. "For the entire marriage," she stood. "You do not understand the pressure I have been under. You have been handling it for 23 months, he said. "What was your plan? Not what you told me. What was it actually?" The room went quiet. She looked at him, then at me. The mask came off gradually. "I thought you had more," she said. "I thought the house was yours. I thought we would be living there by now. I thought the accounts were going to be accessible. I thought a lot of things that turned out not to be true. So you stayed," Daniel said, "because you were waiting for access to money." "I stayed because I cared," she said. "But yes, I thought our life included financial security." "I considered your finances," Daniel said. "I adjusted my savings to match your stated timeline. In good faith, what you describe is different. You considered my father's finances? That is what you were calculating." "My mother set up a trust when I was 21, he said. "She spent her last months making sure I would be protected. And I almost gave that protection to someone who asked about my father's retirement plans on her very first visit to his house. If you are asking me to leave," Victoria said, "I have rights. This apartment may be in your name, but I have lived here as your spouse." "I have spoken with an attorney," I said. "The apartment is separate property. Your protections are limited to personal belongings and the joint account balance. Given what we have reviewed today, that will be a limited argument." "You had all this prepared," she said, "before I did anything." "I had it prepared because people like you exist," I said. "Not because I knew it would be you, because Eleanor knew it might be someone." Victoria looked at Daniel one last time. Her expression was almost sad, but not the sadness of remorse, the sadness of losing. "I need a week," she said. "You have 2 days," Daniel said. She left without saying anything else. We stood in that apartment a long time after. He watched the street. I watched him. "She would have handled it better," I said. "She would have cried in the other room first," he said, "then come out and said exactly the right thing." "Dad, was there any part of you that wanted this to be right about her?" "I thought about it the way he deserved." "No," I said. "Every day I hoped I was wrong. There is nothing about today that feels like winning." "She never asked about Mom," he said quietly. "Not once. Not what she was like, not what she enjoyed. She saw her photograph and said she had a lovely face. That was all." "You can love someone's security without loving them," I said. And from the outside, it uses the same words, the same tone. That is one of the hardest lessons there is. The divorce took 4 months. The prenuptial agreement held exactly as Margaret had confirmed it would. Victoria's attorney reviewed the documents and advised her to accept the terms. She did. Not without a final phone call to Daniel in which she made one last attempt to reframe everything as the consequence of my controlling influence over his life. He listened to the whole call. Then he thanked her for the years they had shared and said goodbye. He told me about it over Sunday dinner 3 weeks later. The months that followed were quiet the way it gets after a storm. Daniel threw himself into work, got promoted again, started volunteering Saturdays at a workshop teaching students how to build structures. I went back to breakfast at the diner with more purpose, joined a group of retired men at the hardware store on Wednesdays, started maintaining the flower beds Eleanor had planted along the south side. The roses looked uncertain under my care, but they survived. Surviving was enough. Biscuit started sitting at the back gate every afternoon waiting for the neighbor's dog Oscar, a border collie who appeared in my yard uninvited. I left a water bowl by the fence. One Sunday in late spring, Daniel came for dinner and told me something that made me set down my fork. Her name is Grace, he said. And the ease in his voice told me something important. She is a structural engineer. We met at a conference in Portland. She grew up in Vermont. She has an 8-year-old niece. She is teaching piano. On our first dinner, when the check came, she took it and said she had a rule about paying her own way until at least the 4th date. Something settled in my chest. I would like to meet her, I said, when the time is right. He nodded. A Sunday dinner, nothing formal. I thought about Eleanor, about what she would have said sitting in her chair, about the letters and documents that kept our son safe long after she was gone, about a locked door that did exactly what it was meant to do, not by keeping something hidden, by revealing the truth about the person who tried to get through it. We sat on the porch after dinner. Daniel had coffee. I had a glass of wine from a bottle Eleanor had chosen 15 years ago at a small vineyard. She had been saving it for something significant. I decided significant was not a future event anymore. Significant was tonight. It was most Sundays now. Dad, Daniel said, thank you for keeping the lock on. He was looking at the yard, the old maple, the flower beds. His voice was quiet in the way that meant he meant it fully. Thank you for coming back to see what was behind it. When I was young, I believed strength meant standing against everything, never bending, never doubting. Then 31 years of inspecting buildings taught me that the structures which last are not the ones that refuse to bend. They are the ones built with enough give to absorb what comes without breaking. And now it's 67, sitting on a porch my wife designed, watching a dog drink water from a bowl I chose to leave out. I understand what Eleanor always knew. The strongest thing you can build is not a wall. It is a door with the right lock, one that stays closed for the people who would take what is inside and opens freely for the people who have earned the right to enter. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone who loved you quietly and built something you did not know about until you needed it, hit that like button and share it with them. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this. And leave a comment telling me which moment hit you the hardest. Sometimes the people who need these words most find them through you.